Hey, so in this video, I'll be putting to bed the myth that Tyrion of the show, of the Game of Thrones show, is a good guy and also is a smart guy. So yeah, we'll be tackling those two myths in this video. So first of all, let's just tackle the idea that he's a good person. Because what the show tries to do towards the end is really portray him as this sort of moral arbiter and somebody we should be looking to decide whether things are right or wrong. And he's often looking at things from afar and being like, oh, you know, this is really bad. And so we're supposed to understand that he's some sort of moral authority that we should respect and identify as a just person, right? However, this is just really not the case, and the show has given us all these instances of him being a terrible person, and so it's very interesting that we're supposed to do a 180 on that. So to start with, we know that he raped a girl back when he was a teenager, Tysha, his first wife, who he believed was a prostitute, but it doesn't make it any less rape. And this was also this is a little bit more understandable because this was under duress, and he likely would have been punished in some way if he didn't do it. But it's still pretty bad. So yeah, not a good way to start your character journey. And then we move on to him, the real nasty stuff where he murders his. Because he convinced himself, this will come under the stupid part, but he convinces himself that a prostitute loves him, and then when he finds out that this is not true, he murders her. And there is some slight argument this is in self-defense because she tried to attack him with like a little paring knife or something. But really, there's much easier ways to deal with this than murdering someone, and he has a chain around her neck and he just chokes her to death when he did not need to do that. So basically, he just got jealous and angry and he just murdered someone. So that's pretty, it's not a very moral thing to do. And if that was happened in the modern world, we would happily put you in prison for that. So yeah, not a good thing to do. And then we move on to him murdering his father. And once again, there's some very slight extenuating circumstances here because his dad was arguably trying to get up. Right, what he was trying to get up to do is neither here nor there. And also, arguably, his dad was trying to have him killed through the judicial process. Maybe, we don't know that for sure. But either way, once again, Tyrion murders this dude in cold blood. In a really gruesome way as well, shoots him right in the bowels. Not very nice. And regardless of what you think, so you may think, for example, that it's worse because he killed his father. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that. I think murder's all just bad. But either way, he kills someone in cold blood. So now he's killed two people in cold blood and raped someone. So that's not ideal. Then I just wanted to quickly comment on the fact that he repeatedly uses prostitutes in a medieval feudal context, which is basically rape in the sense that they don't really have much choice in their profession. So, you know, you can do with that one what you will. So far we have, so if we just want to finish this moral judgment section, he does basically four, like, really immoral things. He rapes someone specifically that we know about. He kind of generally rapes people in this feudal prostitution sense. He murders someone, and he murders his dad. So, and each one of these things has, like, slight extenuating circumstances, you know, so when he raped Tysha, it was because he, you know, would have been punished probably if he didn't do it. The prostitute thing, it's not quite 100% rape, but it's very, the systematic institutional nature of the system is that they don't really have, these girls wouldn't have a lot of choice, so it's not technically 100% rape, but it's still pretty bad. When he killed Shay, she was trying to harm him slightly, but he didn't need to fully murder her. I mean, people pass out, for example, before they die, so, you know, he could have just stopped there. And then his dad did definitely not have his best interests at heart, yet he still killed him. So each of these things are pretty bad. They have slight extenuating circumstances, but you would have to admit that this doesn't exactly paint a picture of a great dude, you know, not like a moral arbiter. And you could argue, well, this is Game of Thrones, you know, he's supposed to be, he's a great character, and that's absolutely true. He's not like a horrible person. He's not like the worst human being ever, but he's a pretty bad guy. And he does do some good stuff, and you have to admit, for example, he gives a design for a saddle to Bran so he can ride a horse. But that doesn't undo the fact that he's done these terrible things. And if the show portrayed him as just a great character, just another, you know, slightly bad dude in the world, or another bad dude in the world of bad dudes, that would be fine. But the self-righteous way they portray him in the later seasons as sort of, you know, your moral judgment dude, you know, who just sits there talking about right and wrong thing to do is quite abrasive. So now let's move into the idea that Tyrion is smart. So repeatedly throughout the show, they talk about Tyrion's brain and Tyrion's mind and how smart he is, and how they need to protect his brain and how, you know, his greatest weapon is his mind and stuff. But let's actually have a look at that. Is he really that smart? So we have some instances of Tyrion not being super smart. So first of all, and I think, you know, yeah, earliest as well in the show canon, is that he believes that Shay, who is a prostitute, loves him, and he convinces himself of this, which is pretty stupid. But once again, we have these slight extenuating circumstances where, to be fair, it's an emotional thing, so you can't 100%, it's not 100% logical, but it is a pretty dumb thing to do to convince yourself that a prostitute loves you, particularly when you're a dwarf. And I understand that actually Peter Dinklage is a pretty attractive dude, a pretty attractive dwarf, but yeah, Daenerys is supposed to be unattractive in this system. He's also a raging alcoholic. He drinks all the time and a lot. And you might say, well, this doesn't necessarily make him stupid. And you know what? I mean, we can discuss how smart it is to binge drink on the daily, but it also does make him do stupid things. Like, for example, when he threatens the king to his face in front of a bunch of people with gelding at his wedding to Sansa, which is a very silly thing to do and almost had some rather severe consequences for him. So he's always drinking and he makes silly decisions when he does that. And then we have probably the elephant in the room for Tyrion's lack of intelligence. Sorry, I was just attacked by a piece of stuff. The elephant in the room for his lack of intelligence, which is the idiotic battle plans he concocts in season 7, and to a lesser extent in season 8. So his battle plan, his idea is that we can't like take the dragons and attack King's Landing because that would be too kill too many people and it wouldn't be humanitarian. And so instead we should have lots of pitched battles and siege King's Landing. So let's just take a second to unpack how ridiculous this is. So first of all, in pitched battles, many people die, okay? Many people die on both sides, particularly in medieval battles where you would have not only people who died in the battle itself, you just have people dying of injury and sickness and stuff related to these armies moving around. So you have very high casualty rates in these battles, not to mention injuries and other, casualties. So first of all, we have that. And then he wants to lay siege to King's Landing. And the way a siege works is that you prevent resources coming into the city, and so that they can't survive anymore and they have to surrender. Well, what does that mean practically? What it means is that you stop food and or water getting into the city, right? So what that means is essentially starving hundreds of thousands of people. I think King's Landing is probably about 1 million people or so. So, and if we think that, say a significant, say 5% of them are going to die of starvation, right? That's, 50,000 people that are going to die, right? Now, if we so this is, as we can see, Tyrion's idea is not a very humanitarian battle strategy. So now if we compare that to just flying a dragon in, torturing, a few hundred people if you need to, and taking over the castle and then taking the city from there. Or just doing the old threatened strategy where you're like, we will torture you all unless you let us in, right? Which would have, even if they killed 5,000 people through this, that's a lot of people, that would still be really bad, But that would be but a fraction of how many people would die in these large pitched battles that Tyrion proposes, as well as the long protracted siege. Not to mention that you have these secondary economic consequences of a long siege, which is that people will not be farming and doing that thing before winter. And so, you have Tyrion's idea of, being more humanitarian and stuff, and this ties into his, moralness. His battle plans being more humanitarian, in fact, not more humanitarian at all. Not to mention that they're simply much less effective, because one of them would involve flying a dragon to King's Landing before they had even built ballistas, so don't give you the ballista thing. Flying a dragon to King's Landing and simply taking over in a matter of hours or days, compared to years long and hundreds, thousands, or even hundreds of thousands more deaths. Not smart from our boy Tyrion there. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the absolute autism that is the scene in season 8 where Bronn walks in with a crossbow and threatens Tyrion, and is like, "You will give me high guard, or I'll shoot you with this crossbow." And the problem with this scene is that when he leaves, he's no longer pointing a crossbow at Tyrion, so Tyrion could just be like, "Oh, I'm not actually going to give you high guard. In fact, I'm going to send some guys to kill you." And you could argue that maybe Tyrion doesn't want to kill Bronn because, he's his friend or whatever, but he definitely didn't have to give him high guard. That was a bit cerebral. And so he finished with Bronn being on the small council. And honestly, I'm not even going to touch on the small council scene where all these idiots are given these really roles that they don't really know anything about. But yeah. So Tyrion. So let's just take the quick summary. He's a bad guy because he raped someone when he was a teenager. He participates in a very rapey system of prostitution. He murdered 2 people, including his girl, his former prostitute, and his father. And he's a stupid guy because his battle plans don't make any sense. He randomly lets Bronn threaten him with a crossbow and then gives him what he wants. He believes that a prostitute is in love with him and acts on that. And finally, he's a massive alcoholic who drinks extensively, and this causes him to make stupid decisions. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video because there's this, the show puts forward this idea that Tyrion's a super big brain, moral person. But I hope by presenting some of these examples that it's become pretty obvious that Tyrion is neither moral and just, nor in fact smart in any way. And so what we end up having is a character that everybody else just totally misunderstands and both within the show and people who watch the show, and that is a consequence of how terrible the last few seasons of the show actually were, in the sense that even the characters within can't see how dumb he is despite his repeated failures, particularly with the battle plans. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day.